You ever wake up thinking it's just another day, and by sunset, your whole world flips upside down? Let me tell you how my suburban life turned into an insane neighborhood war. All because my neighbor Linda decided she was the queen of our little street and tried to force my wife Helen and me into her precious HOA. Yeah, you heard right. She called the cops to get us in line. But the minute those officers saw Helen, you wouldn't believe the look on Linda's face. Those officers, real badges and all, snapped to attention and gave my wife a salute that would make you think you were watching a military parade, not a welfare check. Even now, I get chills remembering it. So, where are you tuning in from? Because this is a revenge story you're going to want to see to the end. 6 months back, my wife Helen was just out of the military, 20 years serving her country, trying to build a quiet life. You know how it is, a lot of veterans struggle to fit in, but Helen? She held herself together better than anyone I'd ever met. Though sometimes I'd catch her lost in thought, as if she was still fighting some invisible battle. We bought this house on Maple Street, not for any HOA perks, but for the yard and the silence. What we didn't know was that our home sat right on the edge, grandfathered in, exempt from the HOA's clause. Helen, always methodical, would be up before dawn, work out with military precision, tend her garden, move with a calm confidence that drew people in but also kept her private. There was this cabinet in our living room, always covered, always spotless. And I never pushed to know more, you know what I mean? Then Linda Walsh happened. 53, divorced, with too much time and a legal assistant's ego. She'd anointed herself the enforcer of the HOA. First time I met her, all smiles, but her eyes were already measuring me, and especially Helen. She started sniffing around, asking questions about Helen's background, poking into things that weren't her business. I could tell she saw Helen as vulnerable, some troubled vet who needed the structure of her little club. That was her first mistake. Next thing I know, Helen's at the kitchen table surrounded by a 47-page HOA packet. Linda says we owe a $2,000 initiation fee. Helen tells me, voice cold. Steady, not angry, just professional. But our deed says otherwise. I swear, I'd never seen Linda look so lost as when Helen started quoting city codes and property surveys at her. Instead of a pushover, she'd found someone who'd spent a career reading briefing papers and outmaneuvering real threats. Linda wasn't having it. She upped the pressure, fake compliance notices, emails full of legal jargon. Helen responded with receipts, city maps, everything ironclad. It was like watching a chess grandmaster playing against someone who didn't know how the pieces moved. But Linda, well, she doubled down. I caught her outside one afternoon, tape measure in hand, claiming Helen's garden was encroaching. Helen walks out, calm as can be, with her own permits and documentation. Linda leaves fuming, but I could see it. She was getting desperate, maybe even a little scared. That's when she started her psychological warfare. Neighborhood meetings, whispered rumors about uncooperative veterans, even hinting that Helen's military training made her a risk. I wanted to ignore it, but Helen insisted we go to one of Linda's little meetings. The room was tense, neighbors shifting in their seats as Linda tried to rile everyone up about community standards. Then Helen spoke. She laid out the law, point by point, dismantled every accusation, and you could hear the air go out of Linda's balloon. By the end, half the room was looking at Helen like she'd just schooled them on life, the other half avoiding Linda's glare. But Linda? She was nowhere near done. She started tracking Helen's every move, snapping photos of her morning workouts, collecting so-called evidence. She even sent a bogus letter from a fake legal group threatening us with annexation. Helen spent 10 minutes on the phone, found out the law firm didn't exist, reported Linda for fraud, and started building her own case. That's when I realized Helen wasn't just defending us. She was collecting evidence, waiting for Linda to self-destruct. Then, one day, I heard Helen on the phone, her voice low, precise. Dad, neighbor situation escalating. Might require police involvement. That's when it hit me. I'd never really asked about her family, but there was a storm brewing, and Helen wasn't afraid. Linda's next move? The nuclear option. She called the cops, claimed Helen was an unstable veteran, refusing community standards, maybe even dangerous. She stood at her window, phone ready, convinced the sight of police would finally force Helen to submit. What Linda didn't know, and never could have guessed, was that Helen had already called her dad, who happened to be the police chief. The morning the officers arrived, Helen was ready. She'd left her display cabinet cracked open, medals and service records glinting in the morning light. Medal of Honor, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. I'll never forget seeing those for the first time. Helen just squeezed my hand, steady as a rock. "Nobody's forcing me in my own home," she said, and I believed her. The officers came up, all business. But as soon as they saw Helen, the medals, the way she carried herself, everything changed. "Ma'am, we're here about a welfare check." Helen answered with the kind of calm that makes even cops listen. Then she handed over her ID. I watched as the older officer's eyes widened. "Sergeant Major, Medal of Honor recipient." He snapped to attention, gave her a perfect salute, and suddenly it wasn't Helen on trial anymore. It was Linda. Linda stormed over, yelling about HOA rules, but nobody was listening anymore. Neighbors poured out of their homes, watching the police show respect to the woman Linda had tried to destroy. Then the supervisor car pulled up. Chief Thompson, Helen's father, steps out, all authority and pride. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" The look on Linda's face. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The fallout was instant. Linda was charged with harassment, false reporting, and abusing emergency services. News crews showed up. Woman Harris's Medal of Honor recipient. That headline stuck like glue. Her former supporters vanished. Even her own family wanted nothing to do with her. Meanwhile, Helen was embraced by the community, honored by veterans groups, asked to help reform HOA policies. Property values rose, and our little neighborhood became a model for veteran-friendly communities. But here's the twist nobody saw coming: redemption. Linda, sentenced to community service at the VA hospital, started out bitter. But day after day, seeing real heroes fight real battles. Something changed. One afternoon, almost a year later, she found me in the grocery store. "I'm truly sorry," she said, tears in her eyes. "Your wife?" I didn't understand. I told her, "We all mess up. What matters is what you do next." And she meant it. She started volunteering, helping veterans, keeping her head down, building a new life out of the wreckage she'd made. Now, our neighborhood is famous for welcoming veterans. Helen runs programs for transition support. I'm HOA president. Yeah, never thought I'd say that. And Linda, well, she's found purpose in helping the very people she once tried to drive out. We threw a block party for Helen, and Linda watched from her window, finally understanding what respect looks like. So, let me ask you, are you building people up or tearing them down? Because somewhere out there, another Linda is making a call, and another Helen just wants to live in peace. The real power? It's not in a title, not in a rule book. It's in service, in lifting others up, even when it's hard. Drop a comment, tell us where you're watching from, and let's talk. Is redemption always possible? What would you have done in my shoes? Here at Echo Stories, we believe heroes come in all forms, and sometimes the best revenge is showing a little grace.